Greetings, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 101 with Valerie Heruska. So she is another return guest. Always great talking with her. She's such a delight, and it was really awesome to be able to catch up with her and share out this conversation as we talked a bit more about her transition recently to the higher ed tech world, and then also just a lot that's changed with that job this calendar year, including going remote during the pandemic, but also a kind of merger acquisition with some other higher ed tech companies. So there's lots to talk about. Really appreciate what she shared as advice for other folks who might be considering a transition like this. So please do make sure to get a notebook ready and jot down some notes, and feel free to reach out to me if there's any questions that you have. I talk to people about this stuff a lot, so I'm glad to kind of have like a platform here to have this conversation to kind of inspire any other folks that might be interested to learn more about this sort of transition from traditional campus-based higher ed positions to stuff adjacent. So without further ado, after this brief message from our sponsor, this is episode number 101 with Valerie Heruska. This episode is sponsored by Degree.me, a one-stop college research tool for students. If you work for a college or university, you'll want to learn all about their ability to connect you with the right students at a budget-friendly price. To find out more, please visit degree.me/HEG. All right. Well, thank you so much, Valerie, for jumping on the podcast again. Starting to kind of revisit some of my favorite guests from prior episodes of the Higher Ed Geek podcast. We'll link out to your prior episode on this show, which was 3 years ago, which is wild to me. One that I've been doing this show for that long, but also I remember also recording the other podcast that I did for the Student Affairs Collective with you, and like just a frequent collaboration here. But I know you're always great to talk to, so I'm super excited to catch up with you and appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, well, thanks for that. It's always been fun to do these, so I'm happy to continue to do it as long as you'll have me.
Yes, it is much appreciated, because I think there's always like people who like reach out because they want to do it and maybe they haven't done podcasts before, and I just think like you're just a very good like conversationalist for this, and just knowing like, okay, who's like really awesome before, just to like fill out my calendar with people that I know would be like game for it and give like a really awesome conversation. So super excited to dive in. So we'll kind of start to kind of catch up since we spoke last. So that's again been nearly 3 years since the other episode. So anybody who may have listened to that, kind of catching them up to where you are now, it's obviously quite a bit of time. I think a lot has changed for you. So like kind of take us back from October of 2017 and sort of like the quick professional journey to how you got to be where you are today.
Sure. I was going to make the joke, by 3 years, you meant March of 2020. So
it certainly feels that way, right?
Because it is August 2020, and so it feels like 3 years have actually happened. But you are referring to October 2017.
The actual passage of time, right?
Yeah. Actual passage of time. So back in 2017, gosh, I was still living in Bloomington, Indiana, and I was an assistant director in residence life, working with student leadership and engagement. So I oversaw 3 residence halls, and I supervised a slew of people. And then I had 2 graduate students, one who worked with Residence Hall Association and National Residence Hall Honorary, and then another one who worked which is now no longer our Community Leadership and Development Center. It just got reinvented right before I left. Speaking of, it's a bummer because it was such a great initiative within the residence halls, and so I was kind of bummed to see it go. Yeah. So I know, I'm just like, so yeah, it was really hard. But hopefully, they made it into something more awesome. But I have no idea because I'm no longer there. So in March of 2019, I left Indiana University and moved to the bustling metropolis, the hidden gem of Western New York, Buffalo, to work as a consultant in student affairs assessment for what was then Campus Labs, but now we were recently acquired into a new company called Anthology. Look at all these changes that are happening. And so that's where I am now. I've been working remote since March 15th, 2020. So it's been fine. My work I do have the ability to go completely remote. Um, I can't travel, but it's been nice just kind of like hanging out in Buffalo with my
Mhm.
pup and doing some really cool things. And so I know another part of this question was how I got into my current role.
Yes, yes.
And so really there was a point, in my residence life career where I was just like, there has to be something else. I knew deep down in my heart that I just didn't have the desire to be an associate director in residence life or director of residence life. It just wasn't in my cards. It wasn't for me. And so I thought about everything that I had done as a whole within residence life. Like, what were some of the committees I had been on? What did I really enjoy doing? What did my strengths play to? And so when I thought about it, I was like, I've always enjoyed working kind of in that technology realm. I was taking courses in instructional systems technology. So it was kind of serendipitous, if you will, for me to make this move. I did reach out to a lot of people in my network who worked in kind of this capacity just for different companies. And I did some informational interviews and I had a former coworker from Boston University where I worked as a hall director who actually worked for Campus Labs, and I reached out to her and she was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so happy you're interested." And so I just submitted my materials and they called me up and asked for an interview. They reached out to me on LinkedIn. So for those of you who don't think LinkedIn is worth it, it's worth it because an HR person will reach out to you to schedule an interview. And so it, I came here. In fact, I interviewed in February just so I can get a real taste of what Buffalo winters were like. Um, and it snowed, of course, and clearly I did not prepare by wearing the correct footwear. Um, you should not wear flats or loafers when it's snowing in Buffalo. And yeah, that's how I got here and where I am. So it's been really fun. Definitely a welcoming change of pace. I sleep so much better at night, and I can shut my computer off at 5 and not worry about any on-call emergencies.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
It is a beautiful thing.
Well, and I think too, like it's interesting. I think, I guess, because I was curious, like if you had sort of like any sort of connection, like you knew somebody, some sort of like kind of degree of separation, which I think definitely helps to sort of
Mhm.
normalize. Because I think this is like a transition that's happening far more frequently, but does, I don't know, it's like it can be intimidating to people of like, even though it is a higher ed technology company, like I know I've found that, especially if you're like going into the right role or the right organization, like it's going to feel familiar in all the right ways and
Mhm.
then like different in all the right ways. Like it is a very different culture. It's going to be different sort of like performance expectations. And then just like you said, where it's like probably a fairly seamless transition to be working entirely remotely, because like most of the job is going to be happening, digitally. But,
Mhm.
so yeah, that's all really interesting stuff. Because I know for me, like I didn't have a direct in, but
Mm.
and I think I don't know. Like we can get into some of the like the more concrete advice and everything like that. But I'm kind of curious because even just in like the year and some change that you've been at Campus Labs, there's been the change of like going remote and just the acquisition and kind of the, because I think that was also like super unique when I heard about it. It's kind
Oh
of like
yeah.
a merger and acquisition, like kind of
It
this
was.
like Voltroning of different like higher ed companies of like the entire life cycle, which is like super exciting. I was very intrigued by it, but
Yeah.
um so I guess maybe some of those details of just like, because that kind of gets to like the transition. So obviously, like just in and of itself, it's can be somewhat of a tumultuous transition for people, just for like the culture of the organization. But you've also gone through a couple of different things in your time there that could
Mhm.
be sort of disruptive. So I guess just speaking to any of those sort of aspects of the time that you've been at Campus Labs.
Yeah, so I'm trying to kind of put this into terms that if somebody who works in student affairs or on a college campus
Right.
who's listening to this may be more familiar with. So I think about it like, let's say a new vice president for student affairs comes onto campus and takes a look at the organizational chart. And I know that a lot of folks tend to kind of move things around and things like that. Um, so that's what I think of this change where we just have a new vice president for student affairs. We are now larger. So we call it Legacy Campus Labs. So old campus labs was about 250 to 300 employees that's both remote and on site in Buffalo. The majority were in Buffalo. We have very few people who are remote.
Mm-hmm.
And now we are a company of about, I think, 1,200 to 1,400. So we just got some new best friends here.
Mm-hmm.
And so my role specifically did not change. I just merged into what we have. We have a student affairs side of the house and um, a institutional side of the house, both working with assessment. And so me and my colleague just rolled into that larger assessment group. That was literally the only change that happened to us. And like our team changed from campus success to education and adoption. So it's very interesting and very fascinating. I am cautiously optimistic. I think, we're still in the very beginnings of change. And I think similarly, if you were to move from, let's say, an auxiliary to then become part of a dean of students, you would notice some
Mm-hmm.
changes too. Um, but, we're just learning and we're growing. But so far, I think a lot of hesitation and anxiety was around what our campuses would think about this. But honestly, it really does not have any effect on them. They are still, within my product lines. I'm still their consultant, and they're still getting the same, service and help that they would get even if we didn't go through this. So, um, it's more internal right now, but again, cautiously optimistic. I think this could just mean better things because we are part of a larger organization. So I think this is all very positive and we're moving in a really good direction. But I have learned that you need to really pack your patience because with a bigger organization, you just have to be patient with the communication. Again, things are always changing, which is great and sometimes not so great depending on how you look at it. But you just have to be patient, and I think my team has done a really good job of communicating what they know in a very timely and good fashion manner. So it's been a very smooth transition, I will say, at least from my end. I don't know about other departments, but mine has been very good.
Right. Yeah, and I think that that's such a good way that you captured it because I think that like it made sense to me. I mean, like I
Yeah.
haven't gone through anything like that.
Yeah.
I mean, in my because like for me, like the only relevance I have is almost like going the other way. So like my prior role was at a ed tech company that
Hmm.
was like hundreds of employees. Like I think they broke 1,000. They were like acquiring other companies and that sort of thing, and then jumped to a place where we're now in a couple of hundred. So. That was like an interesting shift, but it's like we're trending towards where I was. So it's just like, oh yeah, this old kind of like, this old hat, like it feels familiar of just like the things and that we're trying to put in place and all that. But yeah, I mean, it's obviously like that idea of being like cautiously optimistic, but because I'm sure it's just like there's still a lot of things to figure out. Like you
Oh
are like
yeah.
merging the cultures of three different organizations and everything. So it's just like it's hard to say like, yep, everything's figured out and it's okay and like it's great. It's
Oh
just like I mean, there's a lot that we don't know. So it's like, but I guess like it sounds like what they've done so far has been good and reassuring that they probably have the right point of view of to how to get this sort of whole complex system to feel seamless and all
yeah.
that. So
And things you don't, I think, ever think about, like health insurance. So now that we're part of this big company,
Mm.
like what are we gonna do about, like, our health insurance right now is staying the same, but who knows come January 1, what's gonna happen because we're now one big company and we have people all over the world, which is fascinating too. I have colleagues in India, the UK. So I'm like, yeah, when do we get to go there? Like that would be awesome, but I don't think that's in my cards right now.
Right, right. No, and yeah, and I mean, I guess that's interesting. And again, one more thing to sort of like hit on. I mean, just to not assume. I get, you sort of spoke about it briefly of like the transition to remote work, back in March. So like, what has that process been? I mean, maybe just even for yourself and or your team, like whole organization. Because I presume that it was maybe more seamless than it might have been for folks who are working on campuses who just don't really have any shorthand for this whatsoever. But
Yeah, it made me realize that I really truly do need a home office. I'm currently broadcasting live from my kitchen table, which is really bad because if you have snacks, you constantly want them.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
but endless supply of coffee, so that's good. Um, from it really was a an easy transition, since some of our team members are remote. We were used to having like all like remote calls with them anyway, even though we could have been in a room, but they were always on the phone anyway. I think, and similarly to online courses, you really have to be good with communication and
Mhm.
manage your time effectively. I think that's kind of been one of the tricky things, because you don't have that face to face interaction. You have to be able to interpret someone's email versus talking to them in the hallway. So, luckily, again, I work with a really great team. Um, but yeah, I don't think it's been challenging for me. I am building my home office right now, so we'll see what happens. I can't wait for my new desk chair because these kitchen chairs are not the best.
Right, right.
But yeah, no, it's been fairly easy. I know I just got an email saying that our office probably isn't going to open up anytime before January 2021, so I'm in it for the long haul. So here we are.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my current role is remote by design. So like had a nice desk set up in an office in my prior role. And like now when I started too, I was just like, basically, can I have this, but at
Yeah.
home? And like, I like, got all this stuff like super early. Cause yeah, I'm like, and I'm glad that some people are like embracing it. Cause it makes sense just to have a space, even if it's
Yep.
just like, well, if I'm like working on personal stuff, it just is a little bit more comfortable and productive, whatever. But yeah, huge advocate for just like remote work in general and just like optimizing your unique personal workspace and that sort of thing of just like, yeah, whatever chair you want, whatever desk you want, like you
That's
want
right.
lights or this, that, or the other thing. So I keep trying to like kind of continuously improve my setup as well, especially with like
Yeah.
webcam lights and like a more fancy webcam and just the whole deal. So,
Do you know
which,
how many houseplants I plan on putting on my desk? The answer is a
mm,
lot.
yes, yes. That's what I'm like hurting for that. My wife is kind of the, botanist or, whatever you want to call it
Yeah.
in our house. So like they're all in our bedroom on like some of our big windowsills in our
Ooh,
apartment.
love it.
But it's like, there's no plants in here. That would be nice actually. But yeah. So just to sort of like wrap up this point though, like, 'cause I think this is sort of the big question. So, again, especially with everything going on with campuses and maybe people experiencing furloughs or layoffs and those sort of things, it's, I think on a lot of people's minds. I've been talking to a lot of people,
Mhm.
um, about making these sort of transitions. I do it often anyway, but especially more so now. So, like, what advice would you give to somebody who is thinking about making this transition? So, anything that comes to mind about like looking for the right organizations, the right
Mhm.
role, or just sort of how to like best present yourself when you're moving from a campus-based role to a tech. So,
Yeah, I would say reach out to your network. Similarly to what I did, I just looked at folks on my LinkedIn who I did have a good relationship with, because sometimes you just get people who just want to connect with you just to connect with you. But there were former student affairs professionals that had then moved into these spaces. And so I just reached out, just trying to get enough information that I could, about the company, about the role. And don't ever sell yourself short. I think that's really good advice as well. I had 10 years in residence life, and here I am as an adoption assessment consultant. I didn't have like a full background in assessment. I sat on tons of assessment committees, and I still was very involved in the bigger student affairs outside of my residence life bubble. So I think the more you can kind of dig into that, the better off you'll be. There are folks, I think Anthology is one in the unique position of having specifically student affairs, but I think about companies like RoomPack or eRes Life or any of those higher ed adjacent platforms that your experience could absolutely be super helpful to them. So I would just say, or excuse me, presence is another one.
Right.
I
Yep,
would
yep.
say, sorry, I'm trying to think of all of them off the top of my head. Campus groups. So I would just say, don't ever sell yourself short because your experience can be like super transferable. And yeah, just continue to network yourself. You may think that this is, the answer to escaping whatever you are not liking about your current role. However, like the saying is, the grass isn't always greener. It's only greener in different places. And that's true. I do enjoy the work that I do, but there are absolutely some things I miss about working on campus. So you just have to be willing to have that honest conversation with yourself. Is this definitely the right move for me? If so, cool, reach out. I'll be happy to talk to you about my role. And I'm
Mhm.
sure many of the colleagues who have made the transition would be as well.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, like what you were saying, like, because it made me think of something that I've brought up with people pretty frequently. Because especially when we're recruiting for our team, and we do really look for higher ed people, student affairs background, because we really value that point of view and the work that we do, which is student affairs work, just in a different modality,
Mhm.
is trying to be scrutinizing about the people who are just trying to escape something. Like
Yeah.
that's not necessarily like a super compelling reason to like hire somebody. So like kind of fine tuning and contouring your narrative of kind of your professional journey, to make sure that it's clear, like, okay, why now? Why this,
Yep.
perhaps really unique job in this different company, with a different culture and everything. Because I'm grateful that I got the chance to make this
Mhm.
transition in my first job, because it was a lot of transferable skills. I'd only worked in Res Life. It was basically like a student success coach job for online students, and because obviously I'd worked with students, I'd be able to build rapport and just be empathetic and all those things, and it was compelling for them to be able to hire me on, and did that work for over 2 years, which then kind of parlayed into what I do now and all that. But like, uh, I think I've seen sometimes, especially now, where I think there's the temptation of just sort of like, well, everything's bad at where I'm at, so I just want something different, and remote work sounds really appealing or something, like, and I don't know, like, as almost cavalier about what could be, like you said, like, it's not going to just solve all your problems. Like there's going to be other
Right.
crap that you're probably going to be like annoyed with in this job, even though there's like, it's like, oh, it's remote and it's flexible and like innovative and a growing company. That's all great. But then there's still other stuff that's maybe not going to be, appealing to you. And I'm sure some people also might be turned off of just sort of like it being a business, and the way
Yep.
that sometimes decisions need to be made could be, a turnoff for some people. But I know for me, it's been refreshing, how much like metrics drive decisions in terms of like performance
Mhm.
evaluations, and just like honoring the hard work that people put in, and like really rewarding that. So I think that's been really valuable. But yeah, I mean, definitely the core of it, of like, your campus-based experience is valuable. It is so relevant to the work that these like higher tech companies and other organizations are doing. So do not sell yourself short is absolutely
Yeah.
good advice. So
I mean, you bring up a really good point about, there are some things that you're really gonna hate. You learn a lot when at least I did, when you transition from campus life to this business world. Oh my gosh, you learn things that you're like, "What?" The business, it's completely different, so be
yeah.
prepared for
Well,
that.
yeah, when I think what's funny though too is like any of the things that might have frustrated you about working on a campus are then almost kind of like amplified, or just sort
Yep.
of like they're not going away, because most likely you're going to an organization that is working with campuses. So like you're on the outside, and now you're like viewed as like the other, like you're this outside party. And I think some people are, they just sort of bristle at, if they're like, especially in my experience, it's like the person who's sort of like the front line, like academic advisor that's expected to use this platform or do this, that, and the other thing. It's like, well, like my dean signed this partnership. I don't even know what this is. I don't know. Like, and like you're trying to help them because it's like, oh, this is my job, is to like help with this sort of like implementation, or, just like the student success or whatever. But like, I don't know, it could just be like interesting at times for people where it's like, well, now you're on the outside and working with people that you might have like just the culture of the academy and how things get done and budgets and all that. It's like, well, that's not going away. So like, if that's what's frustrating you, it's like you might want to find, something that's maybe further removed or whatever. But
Sure.
yeah, so all really interesting stuff. And yeah, just really good to think through because I think, yeah, I mean, I definitely would emphasize as well, like room packed presence. Some of those folks I've worked with, I know them too, like, and just being able to kind of vouch for them and their really like higher ed point of view versus just like, oh, we're like a tech company that happens to work in higher ed. It's like, no, they've got really earnest, like people who know their stuff. So,
Oh yeah.
um,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But transitioning, so I guess, certainly as we're all, just working from home more and just, isolating and quarantining and just having some more time to ourselves and our homes and everything. I'm curious because I do feel like I follow you on social media. I see kind of the things that you get up to out and about or just at home. But like, what are like you geeking out about right now? What are the hobbies that you're keeping yourself busy with? Because I feel like I know your answers will be, but I'm curious to see like how you talk about them and what you feel like they're giving you personally.
I've acquired so many plants throughout quarantine.
Right. Yeah. That's one of them that I thought. Yeah.
So I've always enjoyed plants, but so the Buffalo Botanical Gardens have their annual sale, and you can get the most beautiful plants for like on the cheap. So of course, I brought $30 worth of plants, and that came out to about 6 plants. And then
Mm-hmm.
I got my ultimate dream plant, my Arabica coffee, which people ask me. They're like, "Hey, how long until you get any fruit?" And I said it's going to be like 5 years, and I could probably use another one or three more of them to actually produce a cup of coffee. So it's a great little plant, but it's not going to fulfill my caffeinated dreams. So that's a bummer. Um, I have been keeping, I think a lot about kind of folks' mental health and mental well-being during all of this, and how
Mm-hmm.
do you keep sane when you can't really see some of the people you really care about. I know for me, my family is in New Jersey, but I can't really see them because my mom works at a hospital, my aunt works at a hospital, my grandma is very high risk, and my brother works really hard, and my two little nephews, they are, nursery, preschool, and like first grade. So, they have those too. So I think a lot about mental health. But luckily, my gym has been doing at home workouts. So that's been really helpful for me. It's a pain, but they recently started doing morning outdoor workouts. So that's been really awesome too. Um, Experimenting with new coffees, that's always a thing. And new tricks. I wasn't really gun ho on the sourdough starter to begin with. I know a lot of people got on board with that, but I had it. It was very hard for me to keep up with it. So unfortunately, it did not come to fruition for me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know it's a big bummer. The best thing I made with my sourdough starter was pizza crust, so I highly recommend that. And let's see what else happened. Oh, I became vegetarian during quarantine.
Mm-hmm.
I know. Well, so um I just wanted to make sure that at the recommendation of my doctor, my primary care physician, that I was getting enough calories because I was working out, doing these rigorous CrossFit esque workouts. I have to say CrossFit esque because I don't have like a full rig or barbell, so I've been using kettlebells, dumbbells, and weight plates. But
Gotcha.
I just wanted to make sure I was getting enough calories in versus calories out. And so I had a meeting with my dietitian. She was like, "Have you ever considered going plant based?" I said, "I can do it." So she challenged me to do it for a week, and that week turned into like, I don't know, 4 or 5 months. So I'm not completely plant based. Like I still have dairy, but everything
Right.
else, yeah, given up giving up animal protein. So here we are. So I've been trying out new cooking recipes, using what's in season, and so that's been really fun and really challenging to do.
Yeah, and that's awesome. I mean, and I guess a follow-up question on that, just out of personal curiosity, because
Yeah,
I have this conversation with my wife all the time, because
yeah,
she like and I appreciate it. She tries a lot of these things and tends to not like them more often than not. But like,
Mhm.
I don't mind where it's like the faux chicken, like the meatless burgers or whatever, like
Sure.
Impossible Burgers and stuff like that. Where do you fall on that? Can't like, because it's just like an interesting like paradigm that
Yeah.
like I feel like probably is like indicative of America of like, well, I'm gonna go vegetarian, but I still want like faux bacon, faux burgers, for like, but it's like we could just have like tofu, like it just fascinates me. Like I appreciate all of those things and I like them, but it kind of like got into my head of just like, well, why do we need plant based tofu protein, whatever, formed into the shape of things that are like animal proteins or whatever? Like it's like a trick, I guess, or something. But like, where do you fall in that camp? Like, do you keep it pretty much like all like veggies, or do you do stuff like Impossible meat and that kind of stuff?
I refuse to buy them because, and here's my reasoning is because I think they're overly processed products.
Right.
And if the whole point is to eat less processed things, why are you going out and buying them? Like, I can make my own black bean burger. That's fine. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I don't really have the desire. And I think it's really all psychological. Like chicken nuggets, right? I love chicken nuggets. I was always a fan. But to kind of trick your mind into thinking that you're eating a chicken nugget is rude. So no, I don't do kind of those Beyond Burgers or anything like that. I stick with things that are natural. So lentils, black beans, quinoa, and mash them into a burger with breadcrumbs and stick
Mm-hmm.
to that. So, and they've come
Yeah.
out pretty tasty. The hardest part of going vegetarian was telling my mother because I told her over the phone, and she was like, "No more chicken cutlets." My mother, being very like, has makes delicious Italian food, so that means no more chicken parm, no more meatballs, no more sausage and peppers and such. It like broke her heart, but she supports it. But it broke her heart.
Right. Yeah. She's like, I gotta go back to the drawing board for like all my recipes or
I
something.
know. Sorry, ma.
Um, yeah.
Whoops.
That is, yeah, it's interesting because I think like that is the thing where like if somebody were to eat like, because I think it came up a lot where when like Burger King had like their Impossible Whopper or whatever,
Mhm.
because it's the idea of like, oh great, like plant based, it's good for you. It's like, well, I mean, it is like better for you like relatively and also like more sustainable, but if you're just to eat that every day, like that's not good either. Like it's like it
No.
is like very processed, so it's like not necessarily like the best option if you were to like rate everything obviously in terms of your personal health. But for me it's like I don't mind them, so I'll
Yeah.
typically like if I have the option, it's like, oh, could I get a burrito just with like Impossible meat, from a
Yep.
from a restaurant or something? It's like, oh, I'm just going to do that. I don't want to eat beef or whatever, so it's like I'll just do that. To me, it tastes pretty much the same, especially if you're like seasoning it well and all that. So
Right.
moderation in all things, I guess,
That's
if anyone's inclined towards those. So that's great. Yeah, and I guess
yeah.
I was also curious on like the coffee stuff too, because I feel like that's been like
Mm.
a geekdom that I've known of yours for some time. So I guess yeah, like what I guess have you been like tinkering with that? I don't know, like I forget if I guess if you're into like making your own like cold brew or if you're like more hot coffee person, any of that kind of stuff. But I guess yeah, just digging deeper with that a little bit.
Oh yeah. So, before all of this hit, I took a homebrew coffee class from a local shop here in Buffalo, and they gave me kind of the breakdown of different things that could really affect your coffee. So it's like using bottled water as opposed to tap water. You
Mm,
should never use distilled water. Um, and they make these actually little tablets to put in your distilled water. I don't know what they do, but see, again, I don't mess with that. So, um, and then they do ratios. So your actual ground size to your water ratio is very
mm,
interesting. Water temperature. There's a different brewing method for cold brew versus an iced pour over, which is fascinating. So yeah,
hmm.
it's been really fun just kind of tinkering around with different coarse grinds and how that affects the flavor and the taste of coffee.
Yeah, and that's I've been like intimidated by that as much as I'm like a
No.
dedicated amateur with like craft beer, and I tried a lot of different stuff, and I'm always inclined towards like exploring that world. With coffee, I've tried to get started with like, oh, like let me make my own cold brew at home and like the grinds and the type of coffee and whatever, but I've like not found the right system and the right kind of coffee that I like the flavor of, and like it either like takes forever or doesn't
Yeah.
taste right, or like I'm just like, oh boy, like because I would love to be able to do it, so I figure Eventually, I will get there. But
You will get there. It just takes a
yeah,
lot of practice. Don't think that every cup of coffee I produce is like amazing. It definitely
right.
like I have a bag of caribou coffee. There we go. And I like caribou. Like, out of the chain system, they're probably in the top 3 that I really enjoy. So, I've noticed that I can put it on a more coarse ground, but it gram quality. Oh, this is another thing. I weigh everything now. So I weigh my grams of
Mhm.
bean to water or whatever else. But I've noticed that the caribou, it takes a lot more to get to that number of gram that I want than any other coffee that I have. So it's very fascinating. It's science.
Yeah.
and
Well,
you
yeah.
and I'll tell you what, the DeLonga coffee, so the whipped coffee, I didn't have a good time with that.
Mm.
I was
Right.
not a fan.
Yeah, my wife did. Chrissy Teigen has like this recipe for Thai iced coffee, which she really
Yum.
enjoys. It's just like instant coffee, cool it, and put like condensed milk and whole milk, and just
Ooh,
mix it up.
yeah.
So she's enjoyed that.
Yeah, that sounds
Um,
delicious and very indulgent.
yes, yeah. I mean, she's ended up now just like using the instant. Like she doesn't make it every single day, but like
Right.
she'll just use the instant coffee if she's like, wants a cup of coffee. But so I guess then as we wrap up, anything really quick that you are reading, watching, and or listening to that like to give a shout out to that we can include in the show notes?
I'm literally watching too much. So I'm going back and watching things like series that I've never fully finished. So,
Mhm.
I've actually never watched The West Wing before. Or House of Cards or Scandal. I think I got through season 1 of Scandal and then stopped, so I'm going back and watching that. So, not so much listening, reading. I'm waiting on some books from the library, so I haven't been able to get a book. But I did the last one I did finish was the newer Hunger Games. Oh gosh, I can't remember the title, but it was a very different perspective of the Hunger Games, and it was really
Mhm.
fascinating. So when I get you the title, because my mind is blanking right now, but it was very good. That was the last book I read.
Awesome.
But yeah,
Awesome.
what's really interesting though, shout out to New York State, because you as a member of as someone who lives in New York State, you can apply and get a library card to the New York Public Library, which is great. So I can use the New York City Public Library now and not
Mm.
just the Buffalo Public Library. It's amazing and I love it. I just got my library card the other day from them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So more books.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Cool. Well, we'll link out to some of that stuff in the show notes. And it is funny. I guess it's all sort of like a common theme for all those things you're watching of like political intrigue. And when if it's
Oh
like a palate
yeah.
cleanser of like, oh, I've got too much West Wing, let me get a House of Cards. And then like bounce around. It's like all kind of the
It's
same
great.
world, which is,
Just
yeah.
give me more. I'm also embarrassed to talk about my like trash TV that I love, but I mean, I guess I might as well shout it out. 90 Day Fiance has just been the highlight of this quarantine. A lot, and I'm so happy Big Brother is back.
Mhm.
Big Brother, I know, Dustin, you're judging. I can hear your
No,
judgment.
yeah, it's not for me. Again, my wife enjoys all that, so like she'll do a lot
Yes,
of like House Hunters and all this stuff, all those types of shows. So
90 Day
that's what
Fiance
she's
is
into
the
right now.
worst show, but it's also the biggest train wreck ever, and I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm
I
done.
guess that's yeah, like that's I guess maybe the palate cleanser of like, it's like, oh man, like really engaged in the narrative of West Wing, and then it's like, all right, let me watch a couple episodes of 90 Day Fiance, like, clear my head, and then House of Cards or
If
something. But
anybody out there is listening and wants to talk about 90 Day Fiance, please let me know, because nobody else wants to talk about it.
right, nobody else wants to admit watching. Like, I know you watch it. I know somebody else
Yeah,
does.
there has to be
Yeah.
more than me just watching it out there, so or else it wouldn't
Oh
still be
man.
on.
Well, then, yeah, we'll wrap up here. So I guess I don't know if there's, any of the things, maybe the books forthcoming or just other stuff in your life. We always like to end the shows on an optimistic note. So anything or things that you are looking forward to generally in your life or the world or anything
Yeah,
that you'd want to call out.
I actually requested some PTO, so personal time off,
Mm-hmm.
for September, and I am going into the Finger Lakes region. Got a cabin, gonna go hiking with my dog. Honestly, I know it's weird, but to take time off, even though I'm working from home, that's still time on, because I am working. So I'm really looking forward to just turning everything off and enjoying nature. I haven't been able to get out to many state parks over the past few months. So September it is. So I'm really excited.
That is a very good, yeah. I mean, like, I feel like I've been hearing so much more about being like people advocating for folks to take their
Hmm.
time off, even though you're at home all the time. And that's like a great use of that time is to just like literally like get away from everything and just, refresh and recharge and everything. So
Yes.
that's very awesome.
And an interesting thing about the Finger Lakes is that they have a lot of wineries, so that will be even better.
Yeah. Well, that's like, yeah, like something to kind of like work towards. Like, yep, we're going to go hiking, do all that, like put in that work and then just relax with yeah, like some good wine.
Because
Because that's it.
you can't spell wine without win.
There you go. There you go. No, because it's like that. That's like what my wife and I will often do. It's like we might be like walking all over like a city or something when we're visiting, and then we just like make it all sort of end at a brewery or something.
Yeah.
It's like a good place to like hang out and kind of just put your feet up and that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, excited for you to have that to look forward to, and just appreciate you so much again for hanging out here and sharing all that you did about your journey. I know it's going to be super helpful and relevant to a lot of folks out there. So yeah, just thank you so much for your time, and I'll let you share.
Thank you, Dustin. It's been fun.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast.